Brady, hard count, hands the ball off. Rojo pops it free. Across the fence, head to the 50-20. Rojo to the 30. Rojo to the 40. Rojo to the 50. Rojo to the 40. Rojo to the 30. High 7 to the 20. It'll be a 98-yard touchdown run by Ronald Jones II. Touchdown, Tampa Bay.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Back at you today for episode 147. Week 11 of the NFL season is here, and it is time for our weekly game preview show. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucks fan himself, Mr. Evan Wanish. And of course, we are joined by a very special guest today to help us cover all things Rams. Founder and CEO of the LA Football Network and host of the LA Football Podcast alongside NFL vet Frosty Rucker, Mr. Ryan Dyrud joins the show. How we doing, fellas? Welcome.
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am doing good. I'm really excited to get this game preview underway because, you know, as history shows us, whenever these two teams match up, they usually play a pretty exciting game. We know they had the shootout in 2019. A lot of people look back to that Monday Night Football Classic in 2000. A lot of history between these two teams. Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend? Excited to talk Rams with you.
Fellas, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and excited to essentially have you on my show too. We're doing this as like a cross pod, and something I swear this wasn't planned. Something super funny, and we never announce our show numbers, what episode we're on, but this is our episode 147 as well. Super ironic. So
I was going to bring that up. I was checking out your guys' podcast feed before the show, getting to listen to how you do it, and I had noticed that we were on the same exact episode, so I think that's hilarious, dude. What a coincidence.
Yeah, crazy. Meant to be.
Absolutely. So taking a look at this Rams team, Monday Night Football in Tampa Bay, you know, the Rams are one of those teams making some noise in the NFC. They are, I believe, tied for first in their division right now, which is a very strong division. But I just think they're one of those teams that isn't getting enough credit right now. Like, they absolutely took it to Seattle last week. And they are 6-3 in a tough division that's still wide open. And I don't know how Evan feels, but as far as I am concerned, they are playing way above the expectations I had at the beginning of the season.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. They're playing above their expectations because after some of the losses they had in free agency, really bringing no one in other than, a couple guys, Ashawn Robinson, Leonard Floyd. And then they had no first-round picks, so, kind of stacked up there in the second round. But, the expectations were, 9-7 last year. They could maybe go 9-7 again, 10-6. With how good of a division, I don't think anyone expected them to be at where they're at right now, tied and in contention and really a contender, in my opinion. And the reason why they're a contender is this defense that's I think what's exceeded really everyone's expectations is, you fire Wade Phillips, you bring in relatively unknown Brandon Staley, who's a first-time ever defensive coordinator, and implementing a new defense with a lot of young guys. They lost, some key starters in Dante Fowler and Corey Littleton and didn't really replace him. Obviously, I mentioned Leonard Floyd, but did nothing at middle linebacker. And they're playing lights out. So I think we'll get into it, obviously, throughout this entire thing, but I think this team is built for the long haul because of the defense, and the offense has been kind of up and down, suspect at times, but considering that's Sean McVay's bread and butter, I think they'll get it figured out at the right time and get everything rolling when they need to. So the fact that the defense is playing so well, that's why I think they're built for this long-term success.
Yeah, well, when I looked at the Rams, I looked at a lot of the things you said. They lost a lot of guys. It just seemed like they were losing guys left and right. And, they really went for it in those few years when they tried and they got to the Super Bowl and they lost. That's when, they're getting Ramsey and they were in on all these big free agents and all these trade rumors. And then they just came up short. And then that's the price you have to pay where you have to let some guys go that you just can't afford. But now, I mean, I agree with you on the defense. I think the big thing is Jalen Ramsey is like Jalen Ramsey again. Last year he was good, but I don't think he was shutdown level. This year he's just been like one of like the best corners in the league. Really starting to show why he's worth the big contract. And I mean, I think now he's finally like back to form where he hasn't been for the past maybe 2 seasons or so. And like you mentioned, a guy like Leonard Floyd. I mean, I was looking at it. I thought Leonard Floyd was always a pretty good pass rusher. I always liked him, but his rookie season, he got 7 sacks in Chicago the whole season, and now he has 7 sacks with the Rams, and we still got a bunch of games left. So, I mean, this guy has been playing great football. I believe he had 3 sacks alone last week, so those numbers are a little skewed, but I mean, it's still a really solid pass rusher. And of course, when you have a guy like Aaron Donald, who is, I think, probably one of like a top 3 or 2 best football player in the league right now. I just think that the defensive line is just going to eat whoever the opposing offensive line is. And, I mean, that's a big key in how, you know, they've been able to have success. Like you said, the offense has been up and down. I'm not a huge fan of Jared Goff, but, like, I think the offensive scheme, I think that fits him well. I think that McVay is just, he's so good at what he does, and like their entire offensive staff, and like guys like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, those guys are really good as well. So they've definitely surprised me a little bit. I thought they were going to be maybe that like 8-8, 9-7 type team, but I mean, they're right in the thick of things right now.
And we'll talk a little bit more about those key players on both sides of the ball when we get into the game preview, but I want to take a moment and remind everybody that this podcast is sponsored by our good friends over at betonline.ag. If you're looking to put some some money on the games this weekend, it's definitely a great weekend to do it. Over at BetOnline, from game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager than any other place online. And of course, they've always got their online casino, which never, ever closes. So head over to betonline.ag today. Take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Once again, betonline.ag, your online sportsbook expert. So we're going to go over some of the top stories coming out of Bucs camp this week. First and foremost, have to give a formal congratulations to Mr. Ronald Jones. He was named the FedEx Ground Player of the Week. His career-high 192 yards on Sunday puts him at number 3 in the league for rushing, 730 yards, trailing only behind Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, without a doubt some of the top-tier running backs in the league. So Rojo, really good performance from him last Sunday, bringing home some hardware. Good week for Ronald Jones. And then another thing as well, the Bucs have altered their practice schedule. And it's funny because Evan and I, we kind of, casually joked about this a couple of weeks ago. We're like, oh, well, Bucs can't play on primetime, so just practice at night, problem solved. Well, that's what Bruce Arians is out here trying to do. He said on Monday that he's going to be changing up the practice schedule in an effort to help them start games off a little bit better. He said, quote, "We're going to try practicing at that game time on Friday and Saturday night and do some more stuff actually Monday morning than we have been doing in the past." So push comes to shove. I guess you got to see what's happening because the Bucs are an abysmal 1-2 on prime time this year. So I don't know, Evan. Do you think it works?
I mean, we'll see, but obviously, I don't think it can be much worse than their last primetime performance. But I mean, like you said, I mean, an abysmal 1-2, and that one against the Giants, that just felt kind of bad. That was just one of them wins. You're yeah, it's a win, but man, they really didn't play that well. And then obviously the Chicago game where they didn't play well, and the New Orleans one where they just got completely outclassed. So I think it's smart to switch up something because clearly after 3 primetime games, something's not working. So I think this is a smart move. I don't know if it's going to work just because I just feel like it's in a lot of players' heads right now. I don't know how much a schedule change is going to actually do anything, but we'll see. And, I mean, I expect a close game on Monday night. I don't think either team is going to blow the other out. But, I mean, we will see.
Yeah. Now, on the injury report side of things, there's a couple of big headlines coming out of both camps this week. As for the Rams, last week they lost veteran offensive lineman, big left tackle Andrew Whitworth. He suffered a knee injury, and it has landed him on IR. So, Ryan, shakes things up for that offensive line a little bit, but what does the loss of Whitworth mean for LA?
It's a huge loss, guys. Other than probably Aaron Donald and Jared Goff, it's the biggest loss this team could have. He's an anchor of the offensive line. He's an anchor of the offense, and he's a leader in that locker room and probably the most trusted guy on the team overall, just with his longevity, with his injury really not being injury prone before this, and just his leadership. So it's a huge loss. He was, I think PFF had him ranked 4th overall out of all tackles in the entire NFL. So he's playing at an unbelievable level for his age. And it's, we hope and pray that he gets well soon and it's not anything that's career ending. He still does have 2 years left on a contract. But as far as just how they replace him, I mean, there's really no truly replacing him, but Joe Noteboom, a guy that drafted at TCU, they actually slid inside last year to play guard, but they'll bounce him back to tackle to take over. And he looked okay in some relief last week, but he'll have a tough task filling those shoes because that is just a huge loss for this offense.
Yeah. Now, on the Bucs side of things, another big name on that offensive line, left guard Ali Marpet. Reports came out of practice today from Rick Stroud in the Tampa Bay Times saying that Marpet's still got this general feeling of fogginess, which he's already missed 2 games. It is definitely not an encouraging sign. One would think that with the game being on Monday night, that extra day can give him a little extra time to just recoup and maybe we see him suit up for prime time, but I don't know, man. Evan, when does this start to become a concern? Because you look at how the Bucs have adjusted. Didn't work against the Saints when they plugged Joe Hagan at left guard. They made some changes against Carolina. A.Q. Shipley played center. Ryan Jensen moved over to left guard, which both of those guys have plenty of experience to do it again. But for Ali Marpet, when does this become a major concern for you?
I mean, it's starting to become a major concern now. You see a lot of guys enter concussion protocol, and they normally only miss maybe 1 game. Now Marpet could potentially miss 3. I mean, that's not great. It really, really is not. I don't know at what point during the Giants game he ended up getting hurt, or getting concussed, I should say. But yeah, this could potentially be his 3rd missed game, and now you're talking like, I mean, is this concussion really this bad? Chris Godwin had a concussion earlier in the season. He missed 1 game and was back in week 3. Now Ali Marpet, who has been just one of the best guards in the NFL this season, and really a reason why Tom Brady hasn't been sacked a whole lot. It's a huge reason why, actually. And he's going to be likely out again, if I had to guess. Like you did say, with the extra day, maybe he's able to give it a go. I think they're going to wait and see how he feels tomorrow and Saturday after practice. But, I mean, he's still got to pass through protocol, and it's starting to become a concern. Every guy's different with concussions. Everybody, there's different levels of a concussion, and everybody really handles them differently. So in Marpet's case, at this point, you're just hoping it's not anything really long term. But I mean, the offense is definitely going to miss him because, like we were talking before the show, Rhett, you can survive with Jensen at guard and Shipley at center when you're going against the Panthers. But when you're going up against this Rams defensive line headlined by Aaron Donald, it's a little bit of a different story. So that's going to be a huge factor. And, I mean, last year, Marpet was a big factor in shutting down Donald. I don't believe Donald had a sack in last year's game. That was a big storyline coming into that game. And now with Marpet potentially being out, Donald might have a field day. So we'll see. But it would definitely be a huge loss if he can't go.
Well, guys, if I can jump in real quick, for those Rams fans out there listening, he's a huge part of your offensive line. You guys obviously know better than me, but I was on a Bucs show just yesterday, and one of their hosts predicted if Marpet plays, the Bucs win. If he loses, the Rams win. So I think that just shows how important he is to this offensive line, to this offense, to what Tom Brady does. And if he doesn't, I think this Rams defensive line can be great. And like you said, in last year's game, they really weren't effective. I know it was a different quarterback at that time, not Tom Brady yet, but yeah, he's just that instrumental, and it'll be a huge game time decision to see if he's out there or not.
Absolutely. So speaking of game time decisions, let's get a little bit more into this game preview itself. So we look at this matchup on Monday night, primetime game, huge playoff implications for both teams. It sets up one of the most critical matchups of the season for both clubs here. The Rams offense, still got Jared Goff, does a pretty good job of spreading the ball out on offense. He's got some really good pass catchers, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Josh Reynolds. They've also got a pretty strong rushing attack despite the departure of Todd Gurley. We talked about the loss of Andrew Whitworth, but that Rams rushing attack, let's talk about it for a minute. They mostly split carries. They've got a trio back there. It's Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, and then they've got Cam Akers, who was a second-round pick this last year. It has worked pretty well. They are productive is quite an understatement when you look at the numbers that they put up. 134 yards per game, and I think a little under 5 yards per carry for that Rams rushing attack. But with all that being said, the Rams can get it done on offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people when they think of Sean McVay and his offense, they think of high-powered, high-scoring, 11 personnel, air the ball out, all this and that. But it's really predicated on being well-balanced and rushing the football. And the way they're able to air it out is if they can get that ground game going early and often and keep feeding those guys. And when they drafted Cam Akers, the thought was out here in L.A. that he was going to be the guy to replace Todd Gurley and take over. And, yeah, you'd have Hendo would come in and be that kind of change of pace, break the game wide open back, and Malcolm Brown would be your goal line or third and short guy. But Akers would be the lead guy, and that hasn't been the case. He was a little banged up early in the year, but even now that he's healthy, this is still a true running back by committee. But when it comes to winning football games, not fantasy games, you really don't care, right? You just want to get the yards and production, and they've been able to do that. And they come up with a tough matchup this week with this Buccaneers, you guys know, have a very good rushing defense. So it's going to be really, really important for Sean McVay and this offense to stick with the run, even if they're not having that 5 yards a clip like you mentioned, Rhett. But if they can, just stay with it, because that opens things up for the passing game. And all Rams fans know, all Rams Nation knows, Jared Goff is a very comparable quarterback. He's very good running this offense, but you don't want your offense going through Goff, because that's not a recipe for success. So they have to stick to this ground game no matter how little they get in the beginning if they want success, because it's worked for them so far. Last thing I'll say, on the only 2 games this year they've rushed under 30 times a game, and one was last week in Seattle when they ran it for 29 times. And Seattle has a 32nd ranked pass defense, so you would think they'd air it out a little bit more. So just shows how important it is to get over that 30 rushes per game clip, and a main reason why they have been so successful.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about that reminds me a lot of like the Bucs situation on offense. The Bucs haven't had the same success like as far as individual running backs go, but like, yeah, I mean, Darrell Henderson, I loved coming out of the draft, and then Cam Akers, the same thing. So the Rams just load up on running backs that I like, I guess. I mean, and it's proven good because, like you said, I mean, when the offense is reliant just on Jared Goff, that's when the other team's defensive line really just starts to tee off. And, I was watching that Miami game to see Tua's first start, and I mean, it just unraveled once things started to get out of hand a little bit and they had to get away from the run game. That's when things started to really not go well. Then the game just got out of hand. But I mean, yeah, this Rams offense is still very high powered, and I think it's better that they moved on from Todd Gurley. I honestly do. I wasn't a huge fan of Todd Gurley. I just felt like his knees were kind of done pretty much. I thought that he just didn't have a whole lot left in the tank, and he's having an okay year in Atlanta. But I think the Rams' plan for as far as like the run game goes has been perfect, and I think it's worked to perfection so far.
Yeah, and a point to that Todd Gurley, because he's still, like you said, he's been fairly productive in Atlanta, and it's good to see him, back home and still playing. And, we all love Todd out here, and he had great years. But I think what was best for the Rams, it was just getting out from under that shadow, right? Because he had such a dominant 2017 and 2018 that then 2019, every game was just questions. Well, why wasn't Gurley getting the ball? Is he injured? Is he not? Is he in the doghouse? What's going on? And so it was always a focal point of media, of fans, and then just of the actual game plan is what's going on with Todd Gurley. Now they can move on and just say, literally, we're running back by committee. We're going to rush the ball 30 times a game and move forward, and that's what it's been. So I think it worked out best for both parties.
Now, while we're talking about this Rams offense, let's not ignore the passing attack that they do have, a really good trio of wide receivers. But I will say, if there's one thing that we've seen this season that can just absolutely tear this Bucs defense apart, it is crossing routes. And I think that is the bread and butter on offense when it comes to guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods for LA. So I'm really expecting that to be a really big focus point for this defense coming into this game. Evan, do you agree? Like, do you think that's just where they can cut us up the most, underneath and maybe some crossing routes? Is, because I feel confident in the run defense. I really do. But It's just those short gains, those quick passes that eat us alive.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at that last game last year, and Jared Goff, I think it might still be a career high for him in yards or something like that. And I mean, they threw the ball all over the lot. And while I think the Bucs defense has improved now from when it was back then, I mean, these guys are still no joke. And if the Bucs game plans the past few weeks on defense have been up and down. New Orleans, the entire game plan, the whole game was just awful. Carolina, you sort of saw the same thing in the first half, and then they made the adjustments in the second half and really able to take over. This Rams offense is so much better than Carolina's, and they just have so much more firepower and speed than Carolina does. And I mean, Carolina's got like guys like Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel. So I mean, I really like LA's offense. Another guy, Van Jefferson, sorry, from Florida. I was a big fan of him. I've seen him make a few plays here and there. Josh Reynolds, I liked him coming out. So I think that they have really stockpiled the receivers well. I believe Gerald Everett at tight end. I've always been sort of a fan of his as well. They got weapons, and if the Bucs are going to sit back and just play soft zone, I think Goff is going to be able to find guys pretty easily. You're going to have to bump them, but when you do bump and play man on those crossing routes and stuff, with how twitchy like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are, that's where you get yourself in some trouble, because on a crossing route, that's like the best way to beat man. You know, I think Robert Woods knows how to, basically get off of his man right away, and then Goff can just hit him, and it wouldn't take much time at all for the defensive line to be able to get there. So I think it could be an issue. I think it's all going to rely on the Bucs pass rush. If they can get home, I think it affects a lot more, and I think it'll change what LA can do. But if they can't, I think it could be a long day, and Goff could have a big day.
Yeah, let's stick with that for a second, because the thing that's given this Rams offense so much trouble, and if you watch the Miami game, you know what I'm talking about, is that pass rush. You know, plenty of cover zero they saw, and the Rams didn't adjust and did blockers back there. And Todd Bowles is he's not shy about blitzing. You know, that's what his defense predicates, is, getting after the quarterback. So let me ask you guys this. What kind of blitzes and stuff does Todd Bowles dial up, and how do you think he does that to basically alleviate what you guys are worried about, these crossing pattern stuff to get after the quarterback?
So I haven't seen him do much cover zero. That's not the type of blitzes that they tend to do. I saw, Miami did it a bunch to the Rams, and the Rams just seemed to have no answer for it at any point in that game. I mean, it seemed like every time Miami did it, it was a turnover going the other way. So he doesn't do a ton of that, and maybe that's in the game plan this week. Maybe Bowles sort of watched that Miami game and saw it and said, "Hey, there's something here." But a lot of times he'll send a nickel. He'll send one of the nickel corners in. Really likes to blitz the two linebackers, Levante David and Devin White. Those guys are his main two blitzers. Just lets them go. Then they have Antoine Winfield in the secondary that'll come down every now and then. So a lot of it's not a lot of cover zero. Normally when he's blitzing, he's sending one or two guys. He's not typically sending the house, but who knows? I mean, maybe he does see something on film and say, hey, every now and then let's try this. So I think it might be something that you see, but for a Todd Bowles defense, in the past 2 years that we've seen it, he doesn't typically run those types of blitzes. But it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of guys that are just coming at you in all different directions. So,
and he really does like to get you in the mental game when it comes to moving personnel around. A handful of times we've seen this season, and Ndamukong Suh will just stand up, and he'll stand at the A-gap like he's the guy who's about to rush through. So, I mean, he'll, give you a bunch of different looks when it comes to the blitz. But, yeah, just like Evan said, you don't see a whole lot of preparing for, that coverage over the middle of the field. That's just where they get eaten up for sure every single week. But let's talk about this Rams defense. We mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but that defense is led, as always, by Aaron Donald, who is probably on his way to another Defensive Player of the Year award. But now they've also got shutdown corner Jalen Ramsey, and then the guy that we had mentioned before, Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd, excuse me. But there are a couple of other big names on that defense as well, and as we alluded to before, they are playing some very, very good football. They shut down Seattle. They held Russell Wilson to probably his worst game of the season. I mean, it really is just complimentary football they're going out there and playing, and they're on a roll right now.
Yeah, like I said right in the beginning, they're surprised everyone, and they're playing lights out. I saw a stat last week. Jalen Ramsey covered DK Metcalf on 30 routes, and Metcalf had 4 targets and 2 receptions for 28 yards. And that's a receiver that's just been lighting the league up and tearing everyone apart, and Jalen Ramsey shut the door on that. But then you mentioned all the big name guys, but you have guys that are not household names that are becoming them. Darius Williams, who's a corner that was, cut by the Ravens 2 years ago, joined the Rams last year. Sean McVay kind of fell in love with them and talked a lot about him, said he's going to have a bright future for this Rams team. And he showed out this year. Week in and week out, he plays better and better. Had 2 picks last week and a huge pass breakup in the end zone against Seattle. So he's played well. Jordan Fuller, 6th-round pick out of Ohio State that everyone thought the Rams were set at safety with John Johnson and Taylor Rapp. The Rams ended up taking 2 safeties in this year's draft, and Jordan Fuller ended up being a starter from day one. Taylor Rapp, unfortunately, now on IR. Hopefully he'll come back at some point in the season. But Fuller's been playing great. He's a lot of fun to watch. And so a lot of these guys in this Staley system just kind of integrates guys that are good at what they do. It doesn't kind of put, round or square pegs in round holes, if you will. Just showcases what their abilities are and allows them to play their brand of football. And it's about, coaches coaching and players executing, and they're all doing it at a very high, efficient level. And it's been fun to watch. And this defensive line, in my opinion, is one of the best in the NFL. We haven't even mentioned Michael Brockers just because he doesn't really end up on the stat sheet, but he's just a beast in the run defense. And, he's a guy that eats up blocks as well, can get after the quarterback if needed, had that big sack on Tua, or he hit Tua, I think, or him and Darnold were on that first play with Tua. It's just a good unit. And a lot of fun to watch. I wish Vita Vea was healthy, because then you'd have former teammates that would be obviously not going up against each other. They both play defensive line, but Greg Gaines and Vita Vea both being UW products. I love me some Vita Vea, so I'm bummed he's on the IR.
Oh, yeah, man. That was a big loss for that defensive line this season. Evan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much covered it. Their defensive line, I think, when you look on paper, and a lot of times when you say, "Oh yeah, I'll look on paper," but it doesn't translate. Well, this one did. I'm a big fan of Michael Brockers. I've always been. A'Shawn Robinson, I think, is okay. I definitely prefer Brockers to him, but they're similar. A'Shawn Robinson isn't going to give you as much pass rush. He's more like a run stop guy, but I still think he's solid. And obviously Aaron Donald. But like I talked about, Leonard Floyd is the guy that
Evan,
really
quick, I don't want to cut you off, but their goal is, because A'Shawn Robinson played his first game last week after being out with a cardiovascular thing. So their ultimate goal is to have those 3 guys on the field at the same time: Donald, A'Shawn in the middle, and Brockers on the edge. So that's the kind of idea. But I totally agree with you that, yeah, I do like Brockers' athleticism, and what a huge get that was, that he signed with Baltimore and fell through and ended up back. So sorry, I just wanted to point that out. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, well, I don't know how you'd run on that defensive line then. So good luck, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think a big key was Jalen Ramsey really coming back and playing like Jalen Ramsey. And then, like you said, with the other corners they had, and I was a big fan of Taylor Rapp. It sucks that he went on IR. But I mean, yeah, their secondary really. I mean, if you're just going back and looking at the game from last year, right? I mean, the Bucks. I didn't think. I thought the same about the Rams defense last year. I thought they were a good unit, and I was shocked when the Bucks were just throwing all over them. But at that time, the Rams didn't have Jalen Ramsey. They still had Marcus Peters. I remember Peters had a pick 6 in that game.
And he got absolutely clobbered by Donovan Smith at the end of it, if you remember that part too.
Yeah, I do remember
I was actually at that game, yeah, so I remember it well.
So I mean, yeah, they're just a really good unit, and I mean, yes, like they haven't played the greatest offenses this year, but I mean, you just look at last week and what they did to Seattle, where Russell Wilson, I mean, you're talking about him in every MVP race talk, every single one. It's involving Russell Wilson's name, and the Rams just completely shut it down. But I mean, they gave up 28 points to the Dolphins, but one was a special teams touchdown. One was a fumble recovery that went right down to like the 2 or 3 yard line, I believe. And one was a fumble recovery for a touchdown. So, I mean, that's not that. Like, I mean, everybody talked about Tua winning his first game. I was like, well, he didn't really do a whole lot, and the Rams still forced a turnover early on there. So, but I mean, yeah, if you look at it, like the 49ers still have a good offense. The Rams lost that game, but still only allowed 24 points. It's very, very impressive what they've been able to do. The weakness, I think, is probably the linebackers. Ryan, if you disagree, you can let me know. But when I look at it, I look at the linebackers, and if the Bucs are going to target one thing, I think, get the tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate, against those linebackers one-on-one matchups and see if you can win them. I think that's where the Bucs' success on offense is going to have to come from. But ultimately, I think it's going to be protecting Tom Brady, especially if Ali Marpet can't go. In the losses that the Bucs have had, in the 3 losses, sacks and hits on Tom Brady have been an issue in every single one. So if you're going to beat the Bucs, you're going to have to hit Tom Brady. If you can't hit Tom Brady, I think it's going to be awfully tough to beat this Bucs team. They just have too many weapons, and I think it opens up a lot. But if you get to hitting them, I think you can really start to beat up on this Bucs team. And look at the Rams. This could be a recipe for disaster for the Bucs if Ali Marpet can't go because, like I said, he's their best offensive lineman, and you're going up against a guy like Aaron Donald. I mean, that's just, like I said, they did a fine job against him last year. But, I mean, Alex Kappa, I like Ryan Jensen, but guard isn't even his natural position. AQ Shipley is undersized. So if Tom Brady has time, I think this could be another shootout potentially. But if not, it could get ugly.
I think it's an accurate statement. The way that this game shapes up. If someone were to say that this could be a shootout, or someone else could say that, this is going to be a defensive battle, low scoring, both are accurate statements. Like, it really is one of those games that looks like all the elements come together and it could go one way or the other. But you brought up the Rams secondary a little bit, and I wanted to transition, talk about some of the matchups we're looking at. We talked a lot about that Rams pass rush and, the effectiveness of any team hitting Tom Brady, slowing down the offense, but I'm going to be watching these wide receivers of Tampa Bay match up with the DBs. Rams defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, they're moving guys all around back there in that secondary. You've seen Jalen Ramsey play like a hybrid nickel, I guess they would call it. They got Troy Hill, Darius Williams. Those guys are playing outside, and then you see them mix it up a little bit. You see Hill at the nickel, Ramsey and Williams are playing outside. So, I'm curious to see how they can attack this wide receiver set because, the Bucs are not shy. Sometimes they'll come at you with 4 wide receivers because, let's face it, they can do it. When you've got Mike Evans, who, while we have complained, has been slow a little bit, he's still, I think, tied for second place in the league for touchdowns right now because it's like a 3-way tie for first. But, he's having a good season. Brady's doing a good job of spreading the ball out. Antonio Brown is finally getting his legs underneath him. So I'm curious to see what they do and how they adjust. And Ryan, how do you think they approach this Bucs offense?
Well, it's you got names and stars at every level of the field. So it's a hard offense to really game plan for and to slow down. Frosty and I talked a lot about this actually when the Chargers played you guys, who they did a good job in the first half and then just completely fell apart in the second half. But, I mean, one thing you have to do against any Tom Brady-led offense, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, Evan, but you have to get pressure without blitzing because, when you blitz, he's going to pick you apart, or you have to really disguise your blitz as well because he'll pick you apart before he snaps the ball and says, okay, this guy's blitzing. I know this guy's going to be open in the flats. I'll just get the ball out, within 1.2 seconds or whatever. So it's key to be able to get pass rush with their 4 guys. And then that allows your secondary better chances. Now, speaking specifically of the secondary, Jalen Ramsey, like you mentioned, Rhett, they've been moving guys all over. We saw last week Jalen Ramsey follow DK a lot more than usual. This week, however, I wouldn't think that just because the Buccaneers have legit 3 number 1 wide receivers. So who do you really want him to be on? So I think he'll pick a side, whether it's right or left, and he'll just stick to that side. And then I would assume Darius Williams will be a little bit more on Antonio Brown just for size-wise, and maybe he runs out of the slot a little more. But it's a good Bucs unit. Especially if they're all on the same page. I think this week with all the COVID stuff that's happened and different practices, that hurts the Bucs a little bit. Tom Brady's, obviously, you guys know, has said a lot about how they're just trying to still get on the same page, still build chemistry, and they need as many reps as possible. And when those get taken away, that bodes well for defenses as opposed to the offense. So that kind of swings in the Rams' favor a little bit. But, hat on a hat, you got to take these Bucks receivers, but I just think the way Staley's schemed things up, and they use Jordan Fuller in what they call like a star position, where he kind of rows around, plays in the box a lot, plays over the top. He kind of is all over the field. So it's fun. It's been fun to watch, but it'll be a really good matchup with these 3 or 4 or 5 wide receivers that the Bucks can roll out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a big key for the Bucks offense, as far as really just taking advantage of this Rams defense is, and it's something we talk about every week on this show, it's trying to get the run game going, which is going to be tough against this Rams defensive line. And if the Bucks rush for over 100 yards, I forget what their record is, but when they rush for over 100 yards, it's like their record is really good. Like, they just normally don't lose. And I mean, last week they rushed for, I believe, over 200 yards. So obviously
98 on one play helps.
Yeah, it's skewed a little bit by that one play, but yeah, I mean, they just, during the Packers game, they rushed for over 100. They dominated the Packers. I believe the Raiders game, they might have gotten close. They really, the offense, yes, it is a pass first offense. It's a Bruce Arians offense that hasn't changed, but a guy like Tom Brady lives off of play action too, and when there's no threat of a run game, that play action threat is just nothing. Like teams are just going to be like, okay, well, now we're going to let Leonard Floyd and we're going to let Aaron Donald just tee off against these guys, because we know that they're going to have to pass it 35, 40 times a game, and that's just not a recipe for success for this offense. So staying on schedule, keeping a balanced attack, keeping the Rams guessing, I think is a big key in determining the success this offense has. And I'll say it one more time. I think the run game, it could be good, but if Ali Marpet's out, I don't see a way they're going to be able to run effectively against this Rams defensive line. I mean, the right side of the Bucks is with a rookie Tristan Wirfs and an inexperienced Alex Kappa. While Kappa's been having a decent season, he's still inexperienced. And then you have likely A.Q. Shipley at center with Ryan Jensen and Donovan Smith on the left side. Donovan Smith's been a target of many Bucks fans, so because he's had really his ups and downs, but his downs are really down.
Really quickly, I don't mean to cut you off, but Donovan Smith, gotta give him some credit. He did play a really, really good game against Carolina, and if there's one thing that we've seen him do well, if you pull him on a block, that's all there is to it. He is extremely athletic.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that, like I said, I think people are sick of me sort of defending Donovan Smith. I'm not saying that he's good. It's just I don't think he's as bad as people say. But this could be a game that, like, after the game, I feel like fans could be like, oh, Donovan Smith lost them this game. Like, I feel like this could be that type of game. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. But I think a lot of the offensive success really depends on if Ali Marpet's there and if they can run the football, even, like, not maybe over 100 yards, but just run it effectively to where it's some sort of a threat.
Yeah, for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, every single week on the show, to wrap things up, we do something called the weekly checklist, and it's a list that I put together over the course of the show. And basically, to put it simply, 3 things the Bucks need to do if they want to win on Monday night. First things first, let's kick it off. 1, Evan had just mentioned it, but don't abandon the run game. This is a pass-first offense, yes, but any offense is going to benefit from a run game that's doing well. And when we've seen this offense play on, all cylinders, it's because the run game is working. So don't be afraid to abandon the run game. It could be a higher scoring game, but give it to Ronald Jones. He's proven he can run the rock, and let's see what happens. Second up on the weekly checklist, you got to keep Brady clean. Again, as we had mentioned, the absence of Ali Marpet, hopefully not, but if it happens, the absence of Ali Marpet will be huge for this offensive line, and it'll be probably the most pressure they have felt on any game this season, because not only are you playing with, a makeshift line a little bit, filling in at center, moving Jensen over to the guard, you're playing Aaron Donald and the Rams defensive line, who is eating people alive. So keeping Tom Brady clean is another one of those things. Just like the run game, you give Brady time, this offense plays its best football we've seen, and it's as simple as that. The last one, I don't want to be overshadowed by anything else, but play a clean game, play a disciplined game, because I think a lot of what we've seen when this Bucks team collapsed under the lights, It's because they beat themselves. And we haven't talked about discipline as much as we have in the past on this show, but it's still imperative that on prime time, you got to show up, no mistakes, because this is a game where that one mistake, that one call that turns a third down into a first down could lose you this game. Just like a lot of them did against Chicago, getting shades of that Thursday night game. But that is my weekly checklist. Evan, if you have anything you want to add for the Buccaneers, and then afterwards, Ryan, if you have a checklist or anything imperative for the Rams on Monday night, feel free. But Evan, anything else?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, if the Bucs do those three things, I think they're going to win. I don't know if all three of those things are going to happen. We'll see. But I mean, I think if they're able to do those three things there, I think the biggest one is probably just shutting down the Rams' defensive line. I think that's just a huge key. And like you said, the penalties, which I mean, against New Orleans, they just got their butts kicked. I mean, they didn't even really. Yeah, it didn't really matter, like penalties, but that Chicago game, yeah, penalties just did them in. I mean, if you cut their penalties in half, they probably beat Chicago there, and it's definitely something that they're going to have to improve upon if they want to win this game, because the Rams is a good football team, and I mean, this is a huge game for the NFC standings as far as playoff goes. Obviously, I know tonight it's Seattle and Arizona as far as seeding goes, especially on the Rams side of things with the NFC West. That is a huge game. So the Rams are going to want to win this one because not only do they want to prove that they're for real, but they could maybe jump a little bit in the NFC West here. So it's definitely a big game for both teams, and it'll be interesting to see. But I think your checklist is pretty much good. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge game for both teams, and if I want to take the easy road, I could just say they just need to blow up your guys' checklist, and that's how they.
Yeah.
But no, it's a huge game. The Rams have been. I think they're a very good team. I think they're a Super Bowl contender, but they haven't really beaten a really good team. Obviously, they beat Seattle, but a division game, anyone can beat anyone. Like it's you could be a bad team and still beat a good division team. So it's their chance to stack a couple games now finally, and prove nationally that they are for real. And this defense is for real, as they're second ranked in the entire NFL, and this offense is getting things going in the right direction. So for them to do that, though, first and foremost, I mentioned it earlier, they have to not only establish the run, but stick to the run. They need to run the ball 30-plus times. I think that's their sweet spot. As long as they get 30-plus carries, I don't care if they're getting 2.8, 3 yards a carry. It at least will establish that they're sticking to it, and it eventually is going to open things up for the passing game and the play action and the bootlegs and the waggles and everything they do well. And you don't do that if you don't prove that you're going to run the ball no matter what. So they have to stick to the run, even if it gets frustrating with that really good defensive front seven for the Buccaneers. So that's one. Number two is on defense. You have to be able to apply pressure on Brady with the four-man front. You can't send a ton of blitzers. You can every now and then if you do good disguises, but they have to get pressure from their big four up front. Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald. If Aaron Donald's doubled or tripled, who's going to step up in his place? You mentioned it earlier, Evan. We saw Leonard Floyd do it last week with 3 sacks. We've seen in the past Troy Reeder do it off the bench. So who's going to be the guy that steps up if Aaron Donald is double and triple teamed? And if not, let's see Aaron Donald get home a couple times. So apply pressure with 4. And lastly, we need an explosive player too. This Rams offense, I think, has been fairly efficient. They've been pretty productive for most weeks, other than a few. But they haven't really had those big, huge 98-yard touchdown runs, right? They haven't had those big, fun, SportsCenter top 10, Jared Goff to Cooper Kupp down the seam for 70 yards. They haven't had those, rollouts to a cutting Robert Woods, Bobby Trees over the middle. So they need an explosive player too in this game. And I think that's going to bode well for them. So those are my 3 checks. If they're able to do that, I think they'll be good enough to take this one as well.
Alrighty, let's wrap this thing up with some good old-fashioned score predictions. I'll start off. Like I said earlier, this is a game that really does seem like it could go either way. It could be high-scoring, could be a defensive battle. Who the hell knows at this point? But I'll tell you this. I think it is going to be an offensive-driven game. I think the Buccaneers are going to have to be rolling on all cylinders, which is even more crucial with the holes at offensive line, but you're going to have to put points up on the board if you want to beat the Rams, and I think they do just that. I have got Tampa Bay coming out on top, and a close one, 35-31. Evan, what have you got?
Oh, man. I do think that Ali Marpet this game depends on what you think Marpet's status is going to be for me. And I don't love this matchup, man. I really, really don't. The Bucks suck on prime time. If they were playing at 1 o'clock on Sunday, I'd feel much better, but they don't. So I'm assuming Marpet's not going to play. So I'm going to go with 31-24 Rams. I just think that they're going to do just enough, and I don't think the Bucks offense might have the ball with a chance to tie it at the end, and I just don't think they're going to be able to drive the field and score a touchdown to tie the game. So I think it'll be a close game. I think this will be back and forth fairly pretty much the entire game, but I just think the Rams pulled away a little bit at the end and escape with a W. So I think if Marpet was going to play and was 100%, my score prediction might be different, but I think it's a huge loss. So I'm going to go with the Rams.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you, Evan. Not to be a homer at all. I've been rolling with this Rams defense all year. I can't bail on them now. I projected last week against Seattle to hold Seattle, one of the top offenses in the NFL, to under 17 points, and they held them to under 17 points. I think what makes this defense so great is they might not get off to the best starts early. They give up some big chunk plays, some big yardage, some points early, but those halftime adjustments, they are one of the best in the league. And from what the Bucks games I've watched, is they're kind of similar on the offensive side, right? They get off kind of slow, and then they make halftime adjustments and come out in the second half guns blaring. So I think we'll see that fun kind of chess match happen at halftime. And I think the Rams, the fact that they've given up like under 20 points total this season in the second half, they come out on top. So I like this game 24-17 Rams.
Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on the show this week, man. Really appreciate you coming on. Where can the people find you and all of your awesome content?
Absolutely, fellas. Thanks for having me. Always love talking any football. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. Our website is the LA Football Network, LAFBnetwork.com. And the podcast, I hope, with former USC Trojan and 13-year NFL vet Frosty Rucker is the LA Football Podcast on the Believe Network. So thanks, fellas.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening on any of our podcast outlets or checking us out with video over on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We are coming up over 1,500 subscribers strong, and of course, all great content. It's the best way to experience the show. You get the awesome video aspect of it. You get the Bucks break. You get the weekly hype videos. You get me and Evan stuffing our faces with chicken wings, in which I came out victorious, just for the record, to let everybody know once again, King of the Wing 2020. But all the great stuff over on a YouTube channel. Make sure you go check that out. You can follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucks news as it happens, you can check out my co-host on Instagram at Bucks_daily. 25,000 plus followers over there. Your best source for Buccaneer news, breaking, no matter what it may be. You can also follow him on Twitter at EvanNFL, where he tweets about Philly sports that not a lot of people care about, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is why you follow him, and he won't follow you back. But I'll tell you who will. Myself, Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. What a mouthful. That's just about going to wrap things up for us on this end. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish, and very special guest, Ryan Dyrud. We'll talk to you guys after the game. Go Bucks.